Hi there. Today I'm going to be showing you how you can use the Marketo API to bulk update period costs in Marketo programs. So if you've wanted to get period cost data into your Marketo programs, but you've been intimidated by having to roll this out across all your past Marketo programs and the amount of work involved in doing this manually, then never fear, because the Marketo REST API is here. This post will walk you through how to collect all your advertising costs in the correct format, map them to Marketo programs, and then import these program names and their costs into a Python script to automatically update each program with all its historical costs. And then once you've done all this backdating and each Marketo program has its historical period costs, you can then follow this Zapier nested looping using webhooks and Python post to see how you can automatically update Marketo period costs every month using Zapier and Google Sheets. So then this will take care of it for you in the future, while this post will take care of things for you in the past. And if it's your first time using the Marketo API, I highly recommend checking out the Marketo API Quick Start Guide to see how you can make your first API request in Postman before transitioning to making requests in code or the Zapier automation tool. If you are unfamiliar with period costs, I give some useful links here for you to get a good introduction. But the basic idea is that each Marketo program has a period cost attribute, which allows you to input marketing costs, which can be anything from advertising, events, and offers. And you can input these for each month that the program is live and generating leads. So then for each month, we have the number of leads generated and the amount it cost us to get these leads. So therefore, we can get the cost of leads calculation using this information. And to show you what that looks like in Marketo, if we go to the setup of one of our programs here, we can see the period costs over time. So if we generated 50 leads in March, our cost per lead would be $1. And if we generated 50 leads in April, our cost per lead would be $2. So using this information, it then allows you to do cost per lead analysis in the Marketo Analytics tab here. But you can look at the Marketo documentation for that because I won't be going through it in this video. Okay, so now let's take a look at how we can begin mapping all the advertising costs that we have to the corresponding Marketo programs that were set up to track the leads generated from these advertising campaigns. If you want to take a look at how to set up Marketo programs to track query string parameters from your ad campaigns, then take a look at the Marketo UTM tracking and automation posts, which shows you how to do this. So then going into this sheet here, we import all our advertising campaigns over time. And for each month that the advertising campaign is live, we put in its corresponding cost. And next, we are going to import all the Marketo programs that were set up to track all the leads generated from these advertising campaigns. And luckily, the way we have our Marketo program set up is that we put the query string parameters that the Marketo program is tracking in the program description. So it was very easy for us to export all our programs and their descriptions. And now in the sheet, we can see very easily which ad campaign the Marketo program was tracking. In the case that you don't have your Marketo program data in this format already, what you can do is you can go to the Marketo API docs and you can look up the program query requests that are available, because you can query Marketo programs by ID, by name, by browsing, by date range, or by tag type. So for example, if you wanted to bring in all your attribution programs in Marketo that you use to track all the visitors from these ad campaigns that you have set up, then you could maybe use the browse API request, where you can specify this is the attribution folder I want you to search within, and then return to me all the attribution programs that exist within this attribution folder. So then you can pull in all your Marketo programs, their IDs and their descriptions. So then you can update their period costs. Or you can maybe do it by date range, where you say, I only want to pull in all the programs from the past year. Or you could do it by tag type. If you have all your attribution programs in Marketo and they've all got an attribution tag, then you can say to the Marketo API, return to me all the programs that have the attribution tag, and then you can extract the Marketo program ID and the program description and whatever other information you need about the programs into this Google Sheet here. And it's also worth noting that when you make one of these API requests, they will give you the program ID. So when you have your pivot table set up, as I'll show you later on, you should use the Marketo program ID here instead of the Marketo program name, because when you're using the Marketo REST API to update program costs, you need to specify the program ID and not the name. As I mentioned before, I was lucky that I was already given this data, but it gave me the program name instead. So I have to make an additional API request later on, which I'll show you, to get the Marketo program ID. So you can shortcut that step and skip it by importing the Marketo program IDs here, and then the corresponding query string parameters that they were set up to track. And that'll save you time later on, and it'll save you API requests too. Okay, as I mentioned at the start of this video, in this sheet, we've got all the UTM campaigns that our advertising campaigns were using, and then we've got the corresponding cost for that advertising campaign for each month that it was live. So therefore, in this sheet here, we need to be able to extract the UTM campaign from the program description. So we just use a Google Sheets formula to do this, and we split out the UTM campaign. So now once we have the UTM campaign, in this spend by campaign sheet, we can then use a VLOOKUP formula where we look up the UTM campaign name in this campaign program mapping sheet, and then we'll pull in the corresponding Marketo program name that the UTM campaign corresponds to. So then now we have a sheet containing the UTM campaign that our advertising campaign was using, the cost of our advertising campaign for this particular month, and then we have the corresponding Marketo program name that was set up to track all the leads generated by this advertising campaign in this month. So now we are set up to create a pivot table, which is the final step to prepare the data for our Python script. Okay, so let's create a pivot table now for this data. So the easiest way to do this is to go Insert, Pivot Table. It automatically selects all the data in the current sheet. So go Create and select New Sheet. And then for this pivot table, I'll show you what the output looks like. We want the dates to be in the columns. We want the Marketo program names to be in the rows. And then we want the costs to be the values in each cell. So coming back here, we want the rows to be the Marketo program name. We want the columns to be the month, and we want the values to be the costs. Okay, so now we have our pivot table. I'm just going to show you some features to make it more user-friendly. So in the view here, we are going to freeze the first two rows. So remember that we've hidden the first row here because we don't want to see it. So we're going to freeze the first two, and then we are going to freeze this one column. So that just means when we're scrolling, it's very easy for us to keep the Marketo program in view along with all the date ranges at the top. So no matter how far we scroll down, we can still see the dates. And no matter how far we scroll to the right, we can still see the Marketo program name. And this is what we are going to import into our Python script. We've got all our Marketo programs, and we've got all of the costs for each program for each month that the ad campaign was live. And then, as I'll show you later on in our Python script, we are going to loop through all of these Marketo programs. And for each month, we are then going to update the period costs using another for loop. If for some reason the spreadsheet software you're using doesn't have a nice pivot table feature like Google Sheets does, or if you're simply nerdy like me, in this blog post here, I show you how you can create your own pivot table just using formulas. So just to give you a quick introduction to that, all the formulas I use are in this pivot table formula sheet here. And the first thing I do is I just have a formula that pulls in all the unique Marketo program names from this column, because you'll notice that a lot of the program names are repeated here, so we only want all the unique Marketo program names. So that's what this formula does. It pulls them all into this column. And then I've got a formula that I created in this cell, and then I dragged it all the way down, and I dragged it all the way across. But basically what this formula does is it combines, I'll zoom in here for you guys so you can see this even better. It concatenates this Marketo program name and the date, and then it looks for the cost for this program and this date in the spend by campaign sheet. And in order to help us do that, in this spend by campaign sheet, we've got a helper column, which just joins the month and the Marketo program name together. So you can see it takes the Marketo program name, and then at the very start, it puts the month, but you can see that the month is actually in a number value here when we concatenate it, but that's fine because that's actually what matches our pivot table formula. So in here, to show you the formula again, we join this date and this Marketo program name, which matches this helper value here because it's the date and the Marketo program name. And then we use a VLOOKUP formula to pull in the cost for this date and Marketo program name combination. And that's what goes into this cell. And then we repeat that in all of these cells down here. We join the month, we join the month and the Marketo program name. We look for the month and Marketo program name in this column. Once we find it, we pull in the cost from column D here. And then we do the exact same going across the table. It's just that we are looking for a different month this time. So we'll combine this month and this program name, and then search for the cost for that month and the program name in this column, and then pull out the cost from column D. So that's how you can create your own pivot table using Google Sheets formulas in the case that your spreadsheet software doesn't have a nice pivot table feature like Google Sheets. But if you can use the Google Sheets pivot table, I highly recommend doing it, unless you're nerdy like me and you want to go this route. Okay, so now that we have all our data in this pivot table formula, we are ready to import it into our Python script. And I include the Python script that I used here in the blog post. So you can copy this code into your own Python terminal and you can modify it as needed. And I understand that a lot of you might not have programming experience, so I'm not going to go into the code in depth in this video. Instead, I'm just going to go through this flow diagram to explain the logic to you of how it works. And then if you have a developer at your company, you can give them this Python script and explain to them what you'd like to do using a flow diagram like this. Or if you really want to implement this and you don't have the skills within your company, you can reach out to me and then I can do something like this for you guys, making this script and tailoring it to your company's needs. So let's take a look at what's going to happen here. So we're going to import the Marketo program names and their costs into our Python script. This is the very first step. So we're going to import all these Marketo programs and all their costs into our Python script. Then we're going to enter a loop, and this is our outer loop here. And the condition we check is, are there more programs to update? And since this is the very first time we're going into the loop, the answer is yes, there are more programs to update. In the case that it's no, that means we've actually updated all our programs. So we go to the very end and we celebrate because it's finished. But since this is the first time we're coming in to this loop, there are more programs to update. So the answer is yes. Then we get our Marketo access token, so that we can make subsequent API requests using this access token. And one thing to note about this access token is that it has a limited life. It only lasts for an hour. So therefore, we have to make a check to say, are there more programs to update? Which we know is true because we've come into this loop here at the top. There are more programs to update. But let's also check that the token life is greater than 60 seconds long, because we need more than 60 seconds to go through all this logic at the bottom. So if we meet these two conditions, there are more programs to update and the Marketo token life is greater than 60 seconds, then let's come into this inner loop here. However, if the Marketo token life is not greater than 60 seconds, then it'll be no. And we'll go down this branch here and we'll come up to this diamond again where it says, are there more programs to update? Yes, there are. So then let's get a new access token. And then once we have this new access token, which should last for the next hour, let's come back in here. There are more programs to update. The token life is now greater than 60 seconds. So let's come back in here and enter the inner loop. And once we're in the inner loop, the very first time we go through, when n is equal to 1, we are going to take the Marketo program name and we are going to make an API request to get the Marketo program ID. And as I mentioned before, if you use one of these program query API requests, it will already return the program ID to you. So you might already have this pivot table set up with program IDs instead of program names. If you do have it set up with program IDs, then that's great. There is no need for you to do this step here because you will already have the program ID, so you can skip this API request and then you can go straight to the right hand side of this branching logic. So in my code, going back here, we look up the Marketo program name to see can we find the ID. If we don't find the program, then we just move on to the next Marketo program name in our list. If we do find it, and the answer is yes, then we go back to the top of our inner loop here. We come back in, since n is greater than 1, we go down the right hand side this time. And then we start an array or a list in Python where we append the costs to this array for this Marketo program. So you can imagine it like this, where when we come down the right hand side here, we've got a Marketo program ID. Let's use this example. So we've got a Marketo program ID, and then for each time we come through this loop and we go down the right hand branch, for each time we do this, we are going to add another cost to the array for this Marketo program ID, so that when we finish going through this loop and we've added all the costs, when we come to the end of this inner loop, then we've got an array with the Marketo program ID and we've got all the costs for this Marketo program ID in that array. So then once we finish this inner loop, we come to this other diamond here where we say, is the number of costs for this Marketo program greater than 0? And the answer to this question should be yes. There could be cases where you have Marketo programs and for some reason there are no costs for those programs in your pivot table. Then in that case, the costs for that program would not be greater than 0. So we'd update the log to say there were no program costs, or there were no period costs to update for this program. And then we just go to the next Marketo program in the list. However, for the vast majority of the Marketo programs we have in our pivot table, they will have more than one cost associated with them. So then we go down the left branch here, we update the period costs for this Marketo program using the Marketo API. So we take all these costs and we update the Marketo program using its ID with these costs. And then we update our log to say we updated the Marketo program with all the period costs we added up here. And then we go back to the top of this loop. Are there more programs to update? Is the Marketo token life greater than 60 seconds? If yes, then come back to the inner loop. And then we repeat all this logic until the Marketo access token runs out. And then we need to come back up here. There are more programs to update. Let's get a new access token. And then we enter all this loop again. Or we keep going until there are no more programs to update. So then we go down the left hand, no branch here. And then we come back to this diamond. Are there more programs to update? No. Then that means we're finished and we can celebrate because we've now backdated all our Marketo programs with their period costs. Great, so hopefully that made sense for you guys, and I know it might not be easy to understand, especially if you don't have programming experience, to understand all this conditional logic and the looping structure. But as I mentioned, walk your developer through this at your company and they should be able to help you out, or just get in contact with me and I can do something like this for you guys. Let's take a look now at what the output log would look like once we've run this. So if we click on this link, this is what the output log would look like. So we can see that we've updated the costs for this program. Let me zoom in for you guys. We've updated the costs for this program over time. So we can see we assigned a cost of $754 here for this date. We assigned a cost of $378 for this date. And we've done the exact same for these two other programs in the log. So that's what the output log would look like. And after you run your Python script, you'd scan through the log here to make sure that all the programs were updated correctly. And to make it easy, you could Command F for like failed. And then this would highlight any updates which were not successful. And then you could maybe rerun the script just for those updates which were not successful. So I hope this makes sense to you guys and it can help you getting cost per lead data for all your Marketo programs once you run this backdating. And if you're interested in learning more about the Marketo API, as I mentioned, the Marketo API Quick Start Guide is a great place for you to start. I linked to it here at the top of the blog post. This is a great place for you to start because it will introduce you to Postman and making your first Marketo API request using Postman, which is a free API testing tool. So I highly recommend you start here to get the fundamentals of using the Marketo API. And I've also got a Marketo API course. And this will get you very comfortable making Marketo API requests and show you how to integrate them into your marketing operations workflows so that you can streamline and automate your processes to save yourself time every day. So check this out as well. And then if you want some follow-up blog posts that you can take a look at, then I've listed 3 down the bottom here. The first of which I've already mentioned, which is the Marketo UTM tracking and automation post, which will show you guys how to set up your Marketo smart campaigns to track visits to your site from advertising campaigns using UTM parameters. If you want to learn how you can populate dynamic email content in your Marketo emails via API, you can take a look at this post. And if you have a bunch of leads in your database that you want to merge in bulk using the API, then you can take a look at this post as well. Anyway, I hope this was useful for you guys. And if you have any questions, then please leave them in the comments down below. And if you found it useful, then please give this video a like. Thank you.